Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of My Favorite Norns scripts. Today I'm going to be talking about Infinite Digits Graintopia. What I really love about this script is that it can process audio files on your Norns as well as audio recorded into the live buffers. On the lines page, Infinite Digits says that Graintopia is an evolution of Barcode, and I can definitely see that. Like Barcode, you can get amazing results without tweaking anything, but I wanted to get to the bottom of what this script actually does. To understand what Graintopia is doing, it's best to start with what granular synthesis/processing is. I'm going to do an extremely brief overview since this is a topic I could spend an entire video on. Essentially, granular synthesizers use small samples of audio, or grains, to generate sound. These grains generally range in length from 1 to 100 milliseconds. The small pieces of audio loop so quickly that they enter audio rate playback, which we interpret as a musical pitch. I can show you a very basic example of this with Ableton Simpler. I've loaded up a perk sample and set the playback window to an extremely small segment of the file. Now I'm going to enable looping. Once you have a segment you like, you can tune it with the transpose and detune controls. This is the same general concept used in granular synthesizers and processors. There are many software granular synths and processors out there, for example Granulator 2, Portal, Quanta, Samsara, and Omnisphere. There are also some hardware options as well. These are more commonly found in Eurorack modules like Morphogene and the all-time classic Clouds, but there are also standalone synths like the Tasty Chips GR1. Graintopia can have up to 6 grains playing at any time, and each grain moves with physics modeled by 1D kinematics of interlocked elastic beads of random masses. The width of the grains correspond to the length of the sample, and the speed, volume, pan, and direction of the grains are controlled through internal random oscillators. When you open up the script, you'll see a blank screen and instructions for recording or loading an audio file. There are 3 buffers, which are referred to as lands, and you can navigate between them using buttons 2 and 3. To get started here, I'm going to load a file from my tape folder. Now that the file is loaded, playback will start. You might notice that the volume is pretty low, but we can adjust that in the parameters menu. I'm assuming this is to keep things under control if you're using all 3 of the buffers at once. As far as the rest of the controls go, encoder 1 freezes the grains, encoder 2 will set the start point of the playback window as well as move the entire window, and encoder 3 sets the end point. I was a bit confused on some aspects of this script, so I reached out to Infinite Digits and he was kind enough to take some time to explain the thought process behind the design. The way the grains work is very interesting. The 6 grains are paired up in 2s, and they interact with the boundary points of the playback window as well as the crossover points where the pairs meet. If you watch closely, you'll notice that the grains will bounce off of each other, and this affects their movement throughout the window. One thing that makes this script unique among granular processors is that the grains really feel like they are physical objects and have weight. The final set of controls are for saving favorites and can be accessed by holding button 1. First, what you're going to want to do is create a window you like using encoders 2 and 3. Once you have something, hold button 1 and turn encoder 3. This saves the window and location info. Now hold button 1 again and create another window. Once you've saved that one, you can use encoder 2 to swap between the 2 markers. By default, the window will glide between markers, but this can be changed in the parameters menu. That covers the Norns Display controls. One thing I do want to mention is that you can't overdub if you're recording into the live buffer. Hitting record again will start recording into a separate audio file. The nice thing about this script is that you can use any of the other numerous looper scripts to create your recordings and then just load them directly into Graintopia. Now that the display controls are out of the way, we can move on to the extensive parameters menu. The first option sets which buffer or land you're making changes for. Since the control scheme is the same for each land, I'll just be covering land 1. File allows you to load an audio file from here instead of the main display. Clear will clear the current buffer if you turn encoder 3. dB sets the volume of the buffer and by default is set to -6 dB. Grain sets the number of grains that will be active, ranging from 1 to 6. Reverb is a dry-wet control for the built-in reverb engine and sounds really nice. Boundary start and width are the same controls found on the main screen that set the playback window. Move duration is basically a slew amount control for swapping between favorites and is measured in seconds. This determines how long it will take to get from one favorite to another. Timescale is a macro control over the rates of all of the internal LFOs. These LFOs affect speed, volume, pan, and direction. Increasing the time scale will make the changes more frequent. Temperature is a bit difficult to explain, but I'm going to do my best. Basically, each grain has energy, and when they collide, they transfer energy. This is what leads to the bouncing effect I mentioned in the last section. If you raise the temperature, the grains will have more energy, and if you lower it, they will have less. Freeze and record are both available from the main screen, so I won't go over them again. Tuning will pitch shift the audio in the buffer in semitones. This is unquantized and ranges 4 octaves up or down. Slew rate sets the glide time for rate changes. The next section is for controlling how random rate changes behave. There are 5 possible values, but since they're all identical, I'll only be going over value 1. Random weight sets the likelihood that this value will be selected. The higher the weight, the more likely it will be selected. Tuning sets the desired pitch shift, and volume sets the volume offset. This menu allows you to set up to 5 unique pitch offsets and prevents the grains from going out of tune when the rate changes. Infinite Digits mentioned that he included the volume offsets so you can rein in high frequencies and boost low ones. I really like the way this script handles pitch shifting because it's still random enough to be unique and interesting, but not too random where your audio file becomes a mess. Like I said in the intro, this script really feels like a spiritual successor to Barcode. Barcode holds a very special place in my heart and was actually the first script I covered in this series. The thing I love so much about it is how instantly accessible and interesting it sounds, and I can say the exact same thing for Graintopia. Before I go, I just want to thank Infinite Digits again for taking the time to field my questions and for making 2 other incredible scripts that I've covered on this channel. That's going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.